Hi there. Have you ever wanted to have a vegetable garden but just didn't exactly know where to put it in your yard? Well, my name's Calvin Gardner, and I work with the Orange County Extension, and I help out with urban gardening. And today we're going to talk about picking the right site for your vegetable garden. There's a few different things you need to keep in mind when you pick it out, but at its core, it's pretty simple. So let's get into it. So the first thing I want to talk about today is sunlight. Sunlight is one of the most important parts of your garden because all plants need it to photosynthesize. So how much sunlight are you going to need? You're probably going to need about 6 hours of sunlight at least during the day. We suggest that through a lot of our research that shows that if you have 6+ hours, it's great. Anything more than 6 is awesome. Anything less than 6, you may find your plants growing a little bit slower and maybe even just being generally less healthy. So, how are you going to figure out if you have 6 hours of sunlight in an area? Well, the best way to do that is to walk out to the site that you're trying to look at and take a picture about 2 hours after sunrise. Then come out around lunchtime, maybe middle of the day, and take another picture. Then come out about 2 hours before sunset and take a last picture. Compare those three pictures and find the area that has the most amount of sunlight, and that should be a great spot to put your garden. So another note on sunlight that I want to make is that shading is really important. So we know that the sun goes from east to west. And so if the sun is on the east side of the sky and we have either a tree or a building in the way, it will be shading out and creating a shade line throughout the day. And the same goes on the west side of us. So we just want to be wary of wherever we put our garden to know that as the sun moves through the sky, we want to account for shade. Also, the sun does shift slightly through the sky, going more southward during the winter months. So to account for that, you just want to make sure that anything that's on the south side of your property is going to cast a little bit more shade than it would on the north side of your property. So you want to be aware of that as well. So another important consideration for your site is going to be soil. And when I say soil, in this case, I'm talking about how wet the soil is going to be in a specific area. So if you walk out into your yard after it's rained and there's puddles everywhere, that's pretty normal. But if you walk out the next day and the next day and you find that there's areas where water is just constantly puddling, the soil seems to be mushy, kind of like here. It always kind of has a dark hue to it and is wet and spongy. You may want to avoid that spot because that just means that water is probably conglomerating there. And if that's the case, then your plants are going to sit in that water. And one thing plants really don't like is sitting in water. Most of the time, it will cause you to have unnecessary disease and just a lot of long-term issues. Even if you build your bed directly on top of it, it can still continue to maintain water in that way. So we just suggest to either try to mitigate that water somehow by draining it or simply moving your exact site just maybe a few steps over or to the nearest place that isn't pooling water. So the last thing for your site is going to be a good water source. Now, why do you need a good source of water? Well, one, plants need water. But more importantly, you need to remember that they need water. So having a hose or a watering pail nearby will definitely help you in being able to get out there and just get water over all the plants. Um, Being able to have it accessible for if you want to put in irrigation later is going to be really important as well. It may not be your first thought when you start your garden that you need to be putting down irrigation lines everywhere, but eventually you may get to the point where you want to have a self-watering system. And that's easy to install, but it is much harder when you don't have a water source nearby. So just remember to have a water source right next to the garden so that you don't forget it, that your plants don't die because of drought, because that can be really frustrating for the home gardener.
For more information on site selection, please visit your local county extension office.